Be me, Veronica, 31. I work as a branch manager at a local credit union. I own a 3-bedroom house in a very quiet suburb. The kind of neighborhood where people complain if your trash cans are out past 6 p.m. My life is incredibly boring. I like it that way. I drink decaf coffee. I own 4 different gray cardigans. My biggest weekly thrill is buying a new candle at Target. My dad is named Sebastian Morrow. He is 62 years old. For 35 years, he was a senior actuary at a mid-sized insurance firm. He is a man who thrives on routine. He used to wear khaki pants with braided leather belts every single day, even on Thanksgiving. He drove a champagne-colored sedan. He called it sporty because it had a sunroof. He once returned a propane grill to Home Depot. I was with him when he did it. He told the teenager at the return desk that the temperature dial felt aggressive. The teenager didn't know what to say. My dad just nodded and handed over the receipt. His idea of a wild night was eating 2 bowls of pretzels instead of 1. He watched the Weather Channel for fun. He had strong opinions about different brands of windshield wiper fluid. 2 years ago, he finally retired. His house was too big for him since Mom passed a decade ago. He was rattling around in there. He started calling me at 2 in the afternoon to tell me about birds he saw. I felt bad for him. I had the extra space, so I invited him to move in with me. I figured it would be good for both of us. He could save some of his pension money. I could make sure he didn't accidentally microwave aluminum foil. The move was entirely painless. He brought exactly 4 boxes of clothes and a recliner. We set up his room. Life was calm for a year and a half. We coexisted perfectly. We watched golf on Sundays. The volume was always at a reasonable 12. We had polite arguments about the thermostat. He liked it at 68. I liked it at 70. We compromised at 69. He would leave his reading glasses on the coffee table. I would put them back in their little leather case. We ate baked chicken and steamed broccoli on Tuesdays. We ate spaghetti on Thursdays. It was peaceful. It was safe. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. My sister Eliza got him an iPad for his birthday. Eliza means well, but she doesn't think things through. She thought he could use it to read his historical biographies. She didn't realize she was handing him a loaded weapon. My father discovered the internet. More specifically, my father downloaded TikTok. I still don't know how the algorithm found him. I have to assume it started innocently, probably videos of guys power washing driveways, or men silently building sheds in the woods, or restorations of rusty cast iron skillets. But the app is a funnel. It grabs you by the ankles and pulls you down. My father slid directly into the deepest trench of what I can only call ancestral alpha content. The transformation was rapid. The first sign of trouble came on a regular Tuesday evening. I had just finished a 9-hour shift at the bank. I was exhausted. I had a headache from staring at loan applications all day. I parked in the driveway. I grabbed my purse and my half-empty travel mug. I walked through the front door. I kicked off my shoes by the mat. I walked into the kitchen to make a turkey sandwich. I stopped dead in my tracks. Every single item from my pantry was spread across the granite counter. It looked like evidence in a drug bust. Boxes of cereal, bags of rice, cans of soup, crackers, granola bars. My trash can was completely overflowing with food. My dad stood at the sink. He was wearing a tight black t-shirt. I had never seen this shirt in my life. It hugged his shoulders. He was pouring an entirely unopened bottle of vegetable oil straight down the drain. I dropped my keys on the counter. They made a loud clatter. "Dad," I asked carefully, "what are you doing?" He didn't turn around. He just kept squeezing the plastic bottle. "Removing inflammatory poisons," he said. His voice was flat. I blinked. "That was brand new oil," I said. "Seed oils are a modern scam," he replied calmly. He tossed the empty bottle into the overflowing trash. "They weaken the body. They pacify the spirit." I stared at his back. "Dad, you ate a frozen burrito for breakfast yesterday." He turned around slowly. His posture was different. He was standing weirdly straight. His eyes were intense in a way I had never seen before. "That man no longer exists," he said. He grabbed my loaf of whole wheat bread, the expensive kind with the oats on top. He threw it into the trash bag. "Hey," I yelled. "I needed that for my sandwich." "Bread is filler," he said. "Bread makes you compliant." I rubbed my temples. "Compliant to who, Dad?" He just shook his head like he pitied me. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He handed it to me. It was a receipt from a local butcher shop. I looked at the total. $480. "Dad, what is this?" I asked, my voice getting high. "What did you buy for almost $500? "Fuel," he said. He patted my shoulder. He patted it way harder than he usually does. It almost hurt. "The diet begins tomorrow," he said. "Prepare yourself." He walked out of the kitchen. He left me standing there with a handful of crushed crackers on the floor. I spent an hour cleaning up the mess. I had to eat a piece of leftover cheese for dinner. I went to bed thinking he was just having a weird phase, like when he bought that metal detector in 2008. I was wrong. The next morning, I learned that fear has a distinct smell. I woke up at 6 a.m. to get ready for work. I put on my bathrobe. I walked down the hallway. I reached the kitchen and immediately gagged. The air smelled heavy. It smelled metallic, like a handful of dirty coins mixed with wet iron. I covered my mouth with my sleeve. My father was standing at the kitchen island. He was entirely shirtless. He was wearing a pair of old gray gym shorts. I am 90% sure they were my gym shorts from high school. On my wooden cutting board sat a massive slab of dark purple meat. It looked like a crime scene. It was raw liver. He had a fork in his hand. He wasn't cooking it. He was eating it. Blood was literally dripping down his chin. It hit the pristine white countertop. "Dad," I said. My voice was actually shaking. "What is that?" He chewed slowly. He didn't break eye contact. "Raw liver," he said. His mouth was red, nutrient-dense, ancient. I retched into the sink. "You cannot eat that raw in my kitchen," I gasped. "You are going to get sick. You are going to give me a disease." "You've been lied to," he said gently. He took another bite. The sound it made was wet and horrible. He swallowed loudly. "Your posture suggests inflammation," he told me. "My posture is fine," I yelled. "Stop eating raw organs on my cutting board." He wiped his chin with the back of his hand. "Fire cooks out the vitality," he explained. "We need the blood." I couldn't handle it. I went back to my room. I locked the door. I skipped breakfast. I skipped lunch because my stomach was turning. When I got home from work that afternoon, the fridge was unrecognizable. I opened it to get a water bottle. My skim milk was gone. It was replaced with 3 glass jars of thick, cloudy liquid. They were labeled unpasteurized kefir in his handwriting. My deli turkey was gone. In its place was a pile of massive white bones. They looked like dinosaur bones. Marrow bones, he called them later. There was a white brick of something wrapped in wax paper. It just said, "Sweet" on it. I didn't even know what suet was. I had to look it up on my phone while hiding in the bathroom. "It's raw beef fat." He was eating raw beef fat. I called my sister Eliza that night. I sat on the edge of my bed holding a pillow. "Eliza, he's losing his mind," I whispered into the phone. He threw away my bread. "He's eating raw liver." Eliza sighed loudly. Her baby was crying in the background. "Veronica, you're overreacting," she said. She always says, "I overreact. It's just a health kick. Mark did keto for 3 months last year. It's fine." "Keto is eating bacon and eggs." "Eliza," I said. "Dad is eating raw organs. He looks like a coyote." "He's just finding himself," she said. "Just let him have a hobby." She hung up to deal with the baby. I threw my phone on the mattress. Nobody believed me. Phase 2 started 3 days later. It was physical training. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had just come back from Target. I was carrying 2 plastic bags full of toilet paper and shampoo. I pulled into the driveway. I saw my father in the front yard. He was sweating profusely. He was wearing the tight black shirt again. He had a heavy iron kettlebell in the grass. He had tied a thick yellow nylon rope to the handle. He was on his hands and knees. He had the other end of the rope clenched tightly in his teeth. He was dragging the kettlebell across the lawn. He was crawling backwards. He looked like a deranged farm animal. Mrs. Whitmore from next door was standing on her porch. She was holding her watering can. She was watching him in absolute frozen horror. I dropped my Target bags on the driveway. My shampoo rolled under my car. "Dad," I screamed. I ran across the grass. "What are you doing?" "Stop it." He spat the rope out of his mouth. He was panting heavily. Sweat was dripping off his nose. "Neck strength," he gasped out. "Essential for combat." "Combat with who?" I yelled. "You live in a cul-de-sac. You're an actuary." He stood up slowly. He wiped his hands on his shorts. "The modern world makes us soft, Sebastian," he said. He pointed at Mrs. Whitmore. She immediately scurried back into her house and locked the door. "We are surrounded by weakness," he continued. I pointed at his mouth. "You have dental work," I yelled. "You have 2 crowns. You cannot pull iron weights with your teeth. The body adapts," he said simply. He picked up the kettlebell with one hand. He walked back into the garage. He left a huge, muddy trench across my front lawn. He called it rewilding the earth. I called it ruining my grass. The dental consequence hit 2 days later. I was at my desk at the bank. I was reviewing a mortgage application for a young couple. My phone buzzed. It was Dad. I answered it. He sounded strange. His words were slurred. "Veronica," he mumbled. "I need transportation." "What's wrong with your car?" I asked. "I can't drive," he said. "I suffered a battle injury." I panicked. I thought he cut his hand off with a cleaver. I told my assistant I had a family emergency. I ran out to my car. I sped home. I ran into the house. He was sitting on the couch holding a bag of frozen peas to his jaw. "What happened?" I demanded. He looked away. The iron fought back, he mumbled. He opened his mouth. His front right tooth was cracked perfectly in half. It looked like a jagged little mountain. "You broke your tooth on the rope," I said. I was furious. I wasn't even sympathetic. I was just so tired. I had to call his dentist. I had to beg for an emergency appointment. We drove to Dr. Sanders' office in silence. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Dad stared out the window. He was holding the peas to his face. We walked into the waiting room. It smelled like mint and sterile wipes. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair holding my fleece jacket. I filled out the clipboard paperwork because he refused to hold the pen. He said the plastic disrupted his endocrine system. I aggressively checked the boxes on the form. Dr. Sanders finally called us back. He's a very nice man who wears golf polos under his white coat. He looked in Dad's mouth. He sighed. "Sebastian." "How did we do this?" Dr. Sanders asked. He was holding his little mirror tool. "I was testing the limits of my jaw strength," Dad said. His voice was muffled by the cotton rolls. Sanders looked at me over his glasses. I just shook my head and stared at the floor. He chipped it, pulling a kettlebell with a rope. I whispered. The dental hygienist dropped a metal scraper on the tray. It made a loud clanging sound. She stared at us. Dr. Sanders cleared his throat. "Well, Sebastian," he said slowly. "Teeth are not designed for towing. We will need a new crown." Dad spit out the cotton. "My bones are denser than the average man," he argued. The tooth failed. I didn't fail. Dr. Sanders didn't argue. He just numbed his mouth and fixed it. Then we went to the front desk. The receptionist handed me the bill. It was $600 out of pocket. Medicare didn't cover the full crown replacement for reckless endangerment. I handed the paper to Dad. "You are paying for this," I told him. He squinted at the paper. "Currency is a distraction," he muttered. He pulled out his leather wallet and handed her a credit card. We drove home in silence again. I thought the tooth incident would snap him out of it. I thought he would realize he was hurting himself. It did the exact opposite. It only radicalized him further. He told me the tooth broke because he hadn't consumed enough calcium. He doubled down on the marrow bones. He started making bone broth on the stove. He left it simmering for 48 hours straight. The entire house smelled like wet dog and old soup. I had to buy 3 pine-scented candles just to exist in the living room. I decided I needed backup. I called my sister Eliza again. I told her she had to come over for dinner. I told her she had to bring her husband Daniel. Daniel is an accountant. He is the most non-confrontational man on earth. He wears quarter-zip sweaters exclusively. He collects vintage fountain pens. I figured maybe another man could talk some sense into Dad. They came over on a Friday night. Eliza brought a huge tray of baked ziti. She set it on the dining table. She hugged Dad. He patted her back stiffly. Daniel shook his hand. "How are things, Sebastian?" Daniel asked softly. Dad just stared at Daniel's shoulders. "Narrow," he whispered. "Pardon?" Daniel asked. Dad shook his head. "Nothing." We sat down at the table. Eliza started serving the pasta. She put a huge scoop on Dad's plate. He stared at the noodles like they were live snakes. "Eliza, what is this?" he asked. "It's baked ziti, Dad," she said, smiling. "I used the good ricotta." Dad pushed the plate away. The ceramic scraped loudly against the wood table. "It's sludge," he said. "It coats the gut. It dulls the mind." Eliza's smile fell. "Dad, I spent 2 hours making this," she said. Her voice was getting tight. Dad stood up. He walked to the kitchen. He came back carrying his own wooden bowl. He sat down. He put the bowl in front of him. It was full of completely unseasoned gray ground beef. It was just a mound of hot, wet meat. He started eating it with a spoon. Nobody spoke. The silence was suffocating. Daniel cleared his throat nervously. "So Sebastian," Daniel said, trying to change the subject, "are you watching the Masters tournament this weekend?" Dad looked at Daniel. He swallowed a huge spoonful of gray meat. "Golf is a walk ruined by synthetic clothing," he said. Daniel blinked. He looked down at his polyester blend quarter zip. "I thought you loved golf," Daniel said quietly. "I was asleep," Dad replied. "I was asleep for 62 years, but now I am awake." He pointed his spoon at Daniel. "How much can you deadlift, Daniel?" Daniel stammered. "Oh, I don't really lift weights, Sebastian. I do the elliptical mostly." Dad laughed. It was a harsh, barking laugh. The elliptical, he mocked. A machine designed to keep you running in place. You are a soy-fed, dependent Daniel. You wouldn't survive a winter in the wild. Daniel looked absolutely devastated. Eliza slammed her fork down. Dad, that is incredibly rude, she snapped. Daniel works very hard, at what Dad asked, moving fake numbers on a screen, while his physical form deteriorates. Eliza stood up. She grabbed my arm. She dragged me into the kitchen. The swinging door shut behind us. Veronica, what is wrong with him? She hissed. She was holding a plastic spatula like a weapon. He insulted my husband. He's eating dog food out of a wooden bowl. I leaned against the refrigerator. I rubbed my face. I told you, Eliza, I whispered. I told you he was losing it. You said it was just a hobby. Well, fix it, she demanded. You live with him. You're letting him turn into a caveman. I felt a flash of anger. I'm not letting him do anything, I shot back. He's a grown man. What am I supposed to do? Ground him? Take away his raw liver? Eliza just shook her head. She walked back into the dining room. She told Daniel they were leaving. Daniel practically jogged to the front door. They left the baked ziti on the table. Dad was still sitting there. He was scraping the last bits of meat from his bowl. She's protective, he noted. That's a good instinct. But her mate is weak. I grabbed the tray of ziti. I threw the entire thing into the trash can. I didn't even care about the waste. I just wanted to break something. I went to my room and cried for 20 minutes. I thought that dinner was the lowest point. I thought we had hit rock bottom. I was so naive. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. It was a beautiful, crisp morning. The birds were chirping. The sun was shining. I woke up early. I made a cup of decaf coffee. I put on my fuzzy pink slippers. I poured a little bit of almond milk into my mug. I hid the almond milk behind the ketchup so Dad wouldn't throw it out. I opened the sliding glass door to step into the backyard. I took one step onto the patio. I stopped. I dropped my favorite ceramic mug. It shattered on the concrete. Hot coffee splashed onto my pink slippers. I didn't even feel it. My father was in the middle of the lawn. He was completely naked. He didn't even have a towel. He was folded into a bizarre upside-down yoga pose. His legs were spread wide open in the air. He was facing the rising sun. He was exposing things to the neighborhood that no child should ever see. My brain stopped working. I couldn't process the visual information. Dad, I screamed. My voice cracked. It sounded like a dying bird. He didn't move. He stayed perfectly balanced on his shoulders. Perineum sunning, he said serenely. His voice carried across the morning air. What? I yelled. What are you saying? Get dressed. Hormonal maximum, he called back. The sun provides pure energy. It unlocks the ancestral testosterone. I ran back inside. I grabbed the knit throw blanket off the couch. I sprinted back outside. I threw the blanket over his legs like I was putting out a fire. He collapsed onto the grass. He tangled in the wool. What are you doing? He complained. You're blocking the rays. I grabbed his arm. I dragged him toward the sliding door. He was surprisingly heavy. Get inside, I hissed. Mrs. Dowling. Whitmore has a clear view from her kitchen window. You are going to get arrested. He stood up. He wrapped the blanket around his waist. He looked at me with genuine disappointment. You are trapped by societal shame, Veronica, he said. You let them dictate your connection to nature. We stood in the living room. I was shaking. My coffee was drying on my slippers. I am not trapped by shame, I yelled at him. I am trapped by a lease. I am trapped by the law. You cannot show your bare ass to the cul-de-sac. He crossed his arms. The blanket slipped a little. I averted my eyes. You are corporate conditioned, he sneered. You care more about Mrs. Whitmore than your own vitality. I pointed at the stairs. Go to your room, I yelled. I actually sent my 62-year-old father to his room. He turned around and walked upstairs. He muttered about domestic captivity the whole way. I sat on the couch and put my head between my knees. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I thought the worst was over. Then the HOA came. It was Tuesday evening. I was trying to watch a baking show to calm my nerves. The doorbell rang. I opened it. Arnold was standing on my porch. Arnold is the president of the Homeowners Association. He is a retired dentist who wears khaki shorts year-round. He has a very red face. He carries a metal clipboard everywhere he goes. Veronica, he said stiffly. He didn't smile. Hi, Arnold, I said nervously. What can I do for you? He tapped his pen against the clipboard. We need to have a talk about Sebastian, he said. I leaned against the doorframe. I felt a headache starting behind my right eye. What did he do now? I asked. Arnold flipped a page. I have received 4 separate complaints this week alone, Arnold said. He read from the paper. Property damage regarding the front lawn trenches. He looked up at me. Noxious odors emanating from the kitchen exhaust vent. He flipped another page. And an incident of public indecency on Sunday morning. Mrs. Whitmore required smelling salts for Veronica. I closed my eyes. I am so sorry, Arnold, I whispered. I will talk to him. I will fix the lawn. I will buy sod this weekend. Arnold shook his head. It's not enough, Veronica, he said. The board is considering formal action. We cannot have this kind of disruption in Oak Creek Estates. We have standards. I opened my mouth to beg for mercy. The front door swung open wider. My dad stepped out onto the porch. He was wearing his gray gym shorts. He was shirtless again. He was holding a massive raw marrow bone in his right hand. It was dripping slightly onto the welcome mat. He didn't say a word. He just stood next to me. He stared directly at Arnold. He didn't blink. Arnold stopped talking. He looked at my dad. He looked at the bone. Dad slowly lifted the bone to his mouth. He took a slow, deliberate bite of the raw fat. He chewed it without breaking eye contact. The silence on the porch was deafening. I could hear the crickets chirping in the bushes. I could hear my own heartbeat. Arnold froze completely. His red face turned slightly pale. He looked terrified. Dad took another bite. He swallowed loudly. Arnold took a step back down the porch stairs. He clutched his clipboard to his chest. Well, Arnold muttered. His voice was suddenly an octave higher. I will just be reviewing the situation. We will be in touch. He turned around and power walked back to his house. He didn't look back. Dad lowered the bone. He wiped his mouth. Weak bloodline, he stated quietly. He walked back inside. I stood on the porch for 10 minutes. I just stared at the street lamp. No citations ever arrived in the mail. Arnold avoided me completely at the mailboxes. I thought my dad had won. I thought he had asserted dominance, and that would be the end of it. But victory only emboldened him. He realized the suburbs were soft. He realized he could conquer them. That was 2 weeks ago. Things escalated beyond my control. My dad didn't just keep up his routine. He started recruiting. I came home last Friday from the bank. I was carrying a folder full of loan documents. I walked into the backyard. I dropped my folder in the grass. There were 4 men in my backyard. They were all over the age of 60. I recognized them. It was Albert from down the street. It was George, who used to be an accountant with Dad. It was Harry, the retired mailman. They were all shirtless. They were all holding kettlebells or large rocks. Dad was standing on top of my patio table. He was leading them in some sort of chant. Push the earth away, he was yelling. Reclaim your shoulders. Albert was red in the face. He was groaning loudly. George looked like he was going to pass out. Harry was actually holding a wooden spear. I don't know where he got a spear. It looked like a broom handle with a kitchen knife taped to it. Dad, I yelled over the groaning. What is going on here? Dad looked down at me from the table. He looked like a chaotic general. We are building the tribe, he announced. The pack is forming. George dropped his rock. It made a huge divot in my lawn. Hi, Veronica. George waved weakly. Sebastian says my cholesterol medicine is poison. He gave me some liver. I feel very strange. I rubbed my face with both hands. Dad, get off the table, I demanded. You are going to break it. It's from Pottery Barn. The table is a crutch, he yelled, but he stepped down anyway. He walked over to me. He smelled like sweat and smoked meat. They are waking up, Veronica, he whispered. They are realizing they have been lied to. You can't do this here, I pleaded. You can't run a cult in my backyard. It's not a cult, he said defensively. It's a primal brotherhood. He patted Harry on the shoulder. Show her the spear. Harry weakly thrust the spear into the air. I sighed heavily. Just please don't kill anyone, I said. I walked inside. I gave up. I started eating my meals in my bedroom. I kept a box of crackers hidden under my bed. I stopped using the kitchen entirely. The fridge was a lost cause. It was entirely full of raw meat and jars of blood. I survived on takeout and granola bars. But the real-world consequence finally caught up to us yesterday. I was at work. It was 2 in the afternoon. My cell phone rang. It was a local number. I answered it. Hello, Veronica speaking, I said. Is this the daughter of Sebastian Morrow? A stern voice asked. Yes, I said. My stomach dropped. This is Officer Carter with the county police. I stood up from my desk. My chair rolled back and hit the wall. What happened? I asked. Is he okay? He's fine, ma'am. Officer Carter sighed. But we have a situation on Elm Street. We need you to come down here. I grabbed my purse. I ran out of the bank. I drove home going 15 over the speed limit. I turned onto my street. I hit the brakes. The road was blocked. There was a police cruiser with its lights flashing. Behind the cruiser was an enormous black tractor tire. It was at least 5 feet tall. It was covered in mud. My dad was standing next to the tire. Albert, George, and Harry were sitting on the curb looking exhausted. Dad was arguing with the police officer. I parked my car on the grass. I ran over. "Officer," I said, "I'm Veronica. I'm his daughter." The officer looked at me. He looked very tired. "Ma'am," he said, "your father and his friends were attempting to roll this industrial tractor tire down the middle of the street. They were blocking traffic. They refused to move for a delivery truck." I looked at Dad. His face was covered in dirt. "We were simulating a hunt," Dad explained. "The tire represents the beast. We must tire the beast." "Dad, it's a piece of rubber," I yelled. "You blocked the mail truck." "The mail must stop," Harry chimed in from the curb. "The mail is a construct." "Shut up, Harry," I snapped. I turned back to the officer. "I am so sorry," I said. "I will get it out of here. Please don't arrest him." The officer wrote something on his notepad. "I'm writing a citation for obstructing a public roadway," he said. "It's a $200 fine. And you need to remove this tire immediately, or I'm calling a tow truck and charging you for that too." He handed me the yellow slip of paper. He got in his cruiser and drove away. I stood in the middle of the street holding the ticket. I looked at the massive tire. I looked at my dad. He crossed his arms. "It was a good workout," he muttered. I lost my mind. I completely lost it. I didn't scream. My voice got very quiet. It got dangerously quiet. "How did you even get this here?" I asked. Dad looked at his shoes. "Craigslist," he mumbled. "How did you transport it, Dad?" "Your sedan cannot fit a tractor tire." He cleared his throat. "George rented a U-Haul pickup truck." George nodded from the curb. "It cost $45. George offered unhelpfully. I stared at Dad. "Roll it into the driveway," I said. "Now." The four of them groaned. They managed to roll the massive tire into my driveway. It leaned against the garage door. Albert, George, and Harry immediately went home. They suddenly remembered they had errands to run. Dad and I walked into the house. I went straight to the kitchen table. I pulled out my laptop. I pulled out a calculator. I grabbed the shoebox where I kept all the recent receipts. "Sit down," I told him. He sat down slowly. He looked wary. I opened the shoebox. I dumped a mountain of paper receipts onto the table. They spilled everywhere. I started typing numbers into the calculator. "Dad, we need to talk about reality," I said. My voice was shaking. "The ancestors didn't have receipts," he tried to say. "Stop," I snapped. "Just stop for 1 minute and listen to me." I held up a long receipt. "This is from the butcher. $800 this month alone on raw meat and organs." I held up the dental bill. $600 because you bit a rope. I held up the police ticket. $200 for a tire. I slapped the papers on the table. "Your pension pays you $3,000 a month, Dad. You were spending half of it on trying to be a caveman." He looked away. He stared at the refrigerator. "Money is fake," he muttered weakly. "It's not fake when the HOA puts a lien on my house, Dad," I yelled. "I am trying to take care of you. I invited you into my home, and you are destroying it. You are destroying my peace." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I was just so tired of being stressed in my own house. "I hate the smell of the fridge, Dad," I said. My voice broke. "I miss eating normal dinner with you. I miss the quiet." Dad looked at me. He really looked at me for the first time in months. The intense, crazy look in his eyes faded a little bit. He looked down at his hands. They were calloused and dirty from the tire. He sighed deeply. His shoulders slumped. It was the first time he looked 62 in a long time. "I just felt so invisible, Veronica," he said quietly. The silence in the room was heavy. I stopped crying. I wiped my eyes. "What do you mean?" I asked. He picked up a crumpled receipt. He smoothed it out on the table. "When I retired, I disappeared," he said. "For 35 years, people needed me to approve things. I had a desk. I had a purpose. Then I came here, and I was just a guy watching the Weather Channel, waiting to die." He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "I watched those videos," he said. "They told me I could be strong again. They told me I could be a leader. They told me I wasn't done yet." I felt a lump in my throat. I reached across the table. I put my hand over his. His hand was rough and smelled like dirt. "Dad, you aren't done," I said softly. "But you can't fight the suburbs. You can't eat raw liver on my counter. You are going to give yourself a parasite." He nodded slowly. "I know," he whispered. "My stomach hurts a lot, actually." I let out a short, wet laugh. "I bet it does," I said. We sat there for a long time, just looking at the pile of receipts. We needed a compromise. "I am an adult and a branch manager. I deal with compromises every day." "Okay," I said. "Here is the deal." He looked up. "No more raw meat inside the house," I said firmly. "If you want to eat dirt and organs, you buy a mini fridge for the garage." He nodded. "Agreed," he said. "No more dragging weights with your teeth," I continued. "You use your hands. Dental work is too expensive." He rubbed his jaw. "Fair," he conceded. "And the cult," I said. "You cannot run the cult in my backyard. Mrs. Whitmore is going to have a stroke." He looked defensive. "The Brotherhood needs a training ground, Veronica. They look up to me. George can almost do a push-up now." I sighed. I opened my laptop. I went to the County Parks Department website. I found a form. "There is a public park 3 miles away," I said. "They have a designated fitness area. I will fill out the permit for a community gathering every Saturday. You can take the tire there. You can take George and Harry there, but you cannot do it on Elm Street." He leaned forward. He looked at the screen. "A sanctioned training ground," he whispered. "Yes," I said, "with permits." He smiled slightly. "That is acceptable," he said. We spent the next hour filling out the municipal forms. I paid the $50 permit fee. We moved the giant tire into the back of his sedan. It barely fit. The trunk wouldn't close. We tied it down with bungee cords. It was absurd, but it was progress. That was yesterday. Today is Saturday. I woke up at 8 a.m. The house was completely quiet. There was no groaning from the backyard. There was no smell of simmering bone broth. I put on my slippers. I walked down the hallway. I peeked into his room. His bed was made perfectly tight. He was already gone. I walked into the kitchen. The counters were clean. I looked at the island. There was a clean plastic Tupperware container sitting there. It was empty. He had moved his meat to the garage. I walked over to the coffee maker. I saw his car keys were missing from the counter. He was at the park. He was leading his boys. I opened the fridge. It smelled like baking soda and normal cold air. There was a carton of skim milk on the top shelf. There was a package of sliced turkey. There was a sticky note attached to the turkey. I pulled it off. It was his messy handwriting. It said, "Bought you some weak filler meat. See you at noon." I smiled. I threw the note in the trash. I poured myself a cup of decaf coffee. I grabbed my favorite pink mug, the one that didn't shatter. I walked over to the sliding glass door. I looked out at the backyard. The grass was torn to shreds. There were deep divots in the dirt, but it was empty. The cult was gone. I took a sip of my coffee. It was warm and perfectly boring. I put my mug down. I turned around and looked at the kitchen island. My house is finally quiet again. I am glad he is here.